The shipyard was quiet now, with the night shift long gone and the stars above blinking like cold eyes in the dark sky. The only sound was the low hum of distant power lines and the soft thump of boots on metal as Tanner Wells walked alone past the closed maintenance gates. He was a human mechanic, young, but experienced and known for staying late when no one else wanted to finish the job. The cargo hauler in Hangar 94 had a small fuel pressure error, nothing big, just a simple repair, so he figured he would knock it out before heading home. He stopped at the brake bench outside the hangar and grabbed a protein snack from his belt pouch, chewing slowly as he stared at the heavy door. In front of him, the hangar was huge, old, and half-forgotten, a place used for storing junkers or retired freighters, the kind of ships that once flew deep missions but were now just scrap waiting for parts. But tonight, he was alone, and that made it feel different, heavier, maybe colder than usual. As he stepped through the entry, locked, the lights overhead flickered once, then again, before buzzing back to a low glow the motion sensors had triggered, but he assumed it was just his own movement. Except the lights didn't react normally. They blinked in a strange rhythm, almost like something had walked through the beam before him. Tanner wiped his hands and turned on his wrist tablet, checking the ship ID and opening the maintenance task logs. Everything seemed standard. The fuel pressure error was logged 5 hours ago. The hauler hadn't flown in weeks, so it was odd the alert just came in now. But orders were orders. He walked toward the back ramp and past stacks of old crates covered in dust and faded warning signs. Then something moved behind the crates. He stopped, his body going stiff for a second, his heart giving one solid thump. He turned, but saw nothing, just a faint shadow stretching along the wall, where the flickering light barely reached. He took a deep breath, blaming the long hours and dim lighting, probably just a loose sheet or a rat, or maybe one of those service drones that sometimes got stuck in old corners. A chill brushed the back of his neck, and he turned again, his hand reaching for the collar of his jacket. The air was cold, but the hangar systems were offline. There should be no air movement at all. He checked his tablet again and saw the power feed drop. The ship's connection just died, tools offline, lights dimming. He crouched and checked the power box nearby. The breakers hadn't tripped, but the flow was gone, completely cut from inside the system. Before he could trace the issue, a loud echo snapped through the hangar. The ship door slammed shut by itself, metal on metal, with no one touching the controls. Tanner jumped and turned around, his eyes now wide and alert, every part of his body tensed. He walked quickly to the ramp and tried the release panel, but it was dead. No light, no access. He pulled out his hand torch and flicked it on, sweeping the beam across the crates and walls slowly. Everything looked still and dead, but something didn't feel right. His gut twisted in a way it hadn't done since training on Ganymede, when a reactor failed and almost took his whole class. He stepped back from the ship and looked up at the catwalks above, just shadows hanging like cobwebs. Nothing moved, but the silence was too thick, too still. He tapped his comm twice to call security, but got only static. The channel was open, but no signal. Maybe the relay was down, or maybe someone had jammed it. Either way, he was cut off from outside help, alone in a dead hangar with something not quite right in the air. He walked slowly around the side of the hauler, his torch sweeping every corner, every shadow too long or too wide. He passed the storage lockers and glanced into the open bay. On his left, old fuel drums, a broken loader, nothing strange, until he saw the footprints, oily black and not human, something with long toes, maybe claws. They were fresh, still wet, still dripping. His hand shook slightly as he reached for his side tool belt, pulling out a wrench. Not much good against anything, but it felt better than nothing. Then he heard the sound he would never forget, soft at first, then louder, heavy footsteps from the far side of the hangar, slow, measured, not mechanical, not boots, but pad, something walking on bare feet, or claws, not dragging, not limping, but moving with purpose, like it knew where he was and knew he was listening. He froze back against the wall, torch off, heart racing, mind screaming at him to run, but his legs stayed locked. The footsteps stopped suddenly, then started again, closer this time, coming toward the crates, then stopping again, like whatever it was could hear him breathing. Tanner dropped low and crawled behind a supply pallet, his eyes locked on the open floor. The sound was closer now, just on the other side of the metal wall. Then silence again, the kind of silence that presses on your ears until it becomes a noise itself. And still he waited, not daring to speak or breathe too loud. He finally gathered the courage to peek out from behind the pallet and saw nothing but shadow and dust and the flicker of dying lights. He stood slowly, wrench in one hand, torch in the other, moving toward the emergency panel by the entry gate. If he could trigger the hangar alarm, maybe someone would come. maybe someone would see what was happening here. Then he heard it again, footsteps this time, right behind him. And no one else was supposed to be there. Tanner spun around fast, his eyes wide, his grip tight on the heavy wrench, his torch beam cutting through the air like a blade. But nothing stood there, just the empty floor where shadows crawled like smoke and dust drifted like ghosts in the flickering light. His heart beat hard in his chest, louder than the silence, louder than the echoes, louder than the memory of those soft, wet footsteps that had stopped so close behind him. He backed away, slowly, careful not to make noise, careful not to trip on the scattered tools or thick cables that coiled like sleeping snakes across the hangar floor. He needed to think, needed to get out, but the gate behind him was sealed shut, and the override panel was dead cold dark like everything else in this cursed place. The emergency comm still gave only static. The signal light blinked weak and slow like a dying eye. The cold air brushed past him again, this time stronger, this time not a breeze, but a breath hot and close and sour like rotting metal or meat that had cooked too long in a sealed room. He gagged and turned quickly, swinging the torch high. But again, nothing there, no movement, no shape, no sound, but he knew he was not alone anymore. Something watched him from somewhere, just out of sight, just beyond the edge of the light. He ran toward the nearest locker bay, hoping to find a backup comm, or maybe a weapon, or even just somewhere to lock himself in. But as he reached the door, he saw it was already open, just a crack not wide enough for someone to walk through, but wide enough for something else. And inside, he saw the night guard, his body slumped forward, his helmet off, his skin pale, his eyes frozen open in horror, his face twisted like he had seen the worst thing the galaxy had to offer, and knew it was not done yet. Tanner stepped back fast, stumbling on his heel, his back hitting the wall hard. The guard was dead. No blood, no wounds, but dead all the same, and something about the way he was placed, something about how clean it was, made Tanner's skin crawl. It felt like a message, like someone or something wanted him to see, it wanted him to know it could reach him anywhere. His torch flickered again, this time stuttering fast before dying altogether, leaving him in the dim red glow of the emergency strips that lined the floor like veins pulsing weakly. He tried the torch again, nothing, dead battery. Or maybe just drained by whatever had taken the power from the rest of the hangar. He reached for his backup, light a smaller beam built into his belt buckle, and switched it on the cone of white light, cutting a narrow path through the darkness. He moved slowly now, more careful, more aware, listening to every sound, every scrape, every creak, every whisper that might not be the wind. He passed the storage racks, where old parts lay forgotten, engines cracked open like bones, and wiring strung like webs. He kept his back to the wall and his eyes ahead until he saw the panel room, the place where all systems for the hangar were controlled, backups, lights, locks, power routes, everything. He ran to it, his boots loud. Now, no time for silence. His hand slammed the access pad, and to his relief, the door slid open, though slower than normal, like the system was tired or scared, or both. He stepped inside and sealed it behind him, breathing heavy, wiping sweat from his brow, though the room was freezing. The panels glowed softly, still alive, still working, but something was wrong. The main feed was looped, repeating the same 3 seconds of security cam footage over and over, a still shot of the open hangar bay from before the lights went out. Tanner tried to override the feed, tried to access the camera logs, but each time he hit the command, the system pushed back, blocking him, locking him out, then crashing back to the loop like it had been rewritten or hacked, or maybe something inside the hangar did not want to be seen. He checked the backup files and found something strange, a file not part of the normal logs marked with a code he didn't recognize. When he opened it, the screen flashed white, then showed a video from 2 years ago. A different mechanic, a woman entering Hangar 94, just like him at night, just like him for a simple repair, just like him, and then the screen went black and her screams echoed from the speakers, not loud, but sharp, broken, terrified. The file ended suddenly, and a single line of text appeared across the screen: Hangar, not safe, do not enter again. Tanner backed away from the screen, hands shaking, eyes wide. He turned and looked at the small emergency locker in the corner, grabbed a flare and a portable beacon, and stuffed them in his belt. He needed to get out now, needed to escape, needed to warn someone, anyone, before this thing or things in the hangar found him like it had found the woman and the guard, and maybe others whose files had been deleted or hidden or erased. He opened the panel room door, slowly, quietly peeking out with the belt light still on. The hangar looked different, now darker, somehow The red floor strips dimmer, the air heavier like it was pushing back like it wanted to keep him inside forever. Then he saw them tracks, not footprints, not claw marks, but drag lines thin and smooth, as if something had pulled itself along the floor like a snake or a slug, or something worse. The lines crisscrossed around the hauler and led toward the far wall, where an old ventilation shaft gaped open, metal bent outward like something had crawled through from inside and forced its way out. He stepped forward, carefully following the tracks, his wrench still in hand, the flare ready in his belt, the air so quiet he could hear his own breath shaking and shallow. Then he heard again, footsteps soft and slow, echoing from the far end of the hangar, coming toward him steady and sure and wrong. Tanner froze again, his back to the panel room, his eyes locked on the dark shape, now moving through the shadows, tall and thin, and shifting like it was made of smoke and skin and sound. The shape stopped and turned, and he saw eyes glowing faint and wrong, like they remembered him from somewhere, like they had watched him from the start. He ran. Tanner sprinted across the hangar, his breath ragged, his boots thudding against the steel floor, the sound echoing like thunder. Through the massive chamber behind him came the slow dragging sound again, soft but steady, like it had no need to run, like it knew it would catch him sooner or later. His belt light bounced wildly with each step, throwing dancing shadows across the walls and crates, some of them too tall, too sharp, too alive to be just shadows. He ducked behind a grounded cargo pod, slamming his back to the cold metal, crouching low, heart pounding so hard it made his chest ache. He gripped the wrench in both hands, trying to calm his breath, trying to listen to Hangar. Had gone still again, not quiet, but still, like everything inside. It had frozen, like the walls were holding their breath. He peeked around the edge of the pod and saw nothing but the soft red glow of floor lights and the dark, open hull of the old freighter. He had come here to repair it, loomed now like a tomb, a forgotten ship with forgotten ghosts. And somewhere in its shadow the thing waited. Tanner knew it could see him, even if he couldn't see it yet. He crawled along the pod side, careful to stay low, his fingers brushing along the cold floor until they found a drop plasma cutter, heavy and old. But with a manual ignition, he grabbed it tight and pulled it close, just in case the wrench wouldn't be enough, just in case the flare wouldn't scare it, just in case it came out of the dark tonight. The sound returned, faint again, dragging, sliding, shifting through air that smelled like rust and fear. Tanner moved faster, now dodging from crate to crate, each step heavier than the last, sweat dripping in his eyes. As he reached the side door of the freighter, he pressed the manual release, but nothing happened. Then remembered the power was still down, so he forced it open, inch by inch, metal scraping loud against the frame until it gave way. Inside was darkness thicker than the hangar outside, broken only by blinking emergency strips on the walls, casting pale blue light across rusted floors, and dangling wires. The ship groaned like it hated being touched, like it wanted to be left alone, like it knew something wrong had entered long before Tanner ever did. He moved deeper through the narrow hallway, past storage rooms with shattered doors and empty racks, past signs of struggle, claw marks on the walls, burned streaks on the floor, even what looked like blood dried and dark smeared across the edge of a sealed bulkhead. He opened a locker, found a cracked helmet and a half-charged comm unit, the screen blinking weak but alive. He tried to send a signal of distress, call anything, but the screen only flickered and returned static. Then words began to scroll across it, not his words, not from the comm center, but from something else, something watching him from somewhere nearby. The words said, "It remembers you." Tanner dropped the unit and stumbled back, nearly tripping over a loose pipe. He caught himself breathing heavy, eyes darting to every shadow, every corner, every vent. He pulled the flare from his belt and lit it. The sudden burst of light, painting the corridor in red and gold, smoke curling from the flame like a warning. The flare light pushed the shadows back a little, just enough to show movement, something slipping away just beyond the next corner, something that moved like it had too many joints, too many arms, or none at all. Tanner stepped forward slowly, holding the flare high, the cutter ready in his other hand. He had to know, he had to see it, or it would always have the edge. He turned the corner and found the crew quarters door, half open. Something had forced its way in, not clean, not smart, just brute strength, metal bent like wax. Inside the room was a mess, bunks torn apart, personal lockers ripped open, strange black residue smeared across the walls like oil, but thicker, stickier, like it had bled from the metal itself. In the far corner was a message burned into the wall with a cutter like his, but older, the letters shaky and rushed, they read. It came from the walls. We heard it whispering in the vents. It knows our names. Tanner stepped back again, his chest tight, his skin crawling. He had to get out, he had to warn someone, but every step forward felt like a step deeper into the nightmare. The flare's light began to dim, now burning low, flickering as the air grew colder again, the temperature dropping, fast breath fogging in the light, the silence pressing in from all sides. Then he heard it again, footsteps, but wrong somehow, too light, too smooth, like something pretending to walk, like something that had learned how from watching, not doing the sound, echoed through the hallway from behind him, then from in front, then from above and below, like it was all around him at once. He turned toward the engine bay, doors the only place left unlocked, the only way out that didn't lead back into the hangar. He pushed through and froze, because inside was not a room, but a space torn open by something massive, something that had ripped through the back hull and vanished into the vacuum outside, the stars blinking beyond the hole like cold eyes watching the room, still held the shape of whatever had passed through, like space itself had recoiled from the contact. Tanner backed away again, not sure where to go now, every path closed, or cursed every escape either dead, or worse than a screen near the engine core flickered on, without power, without connection, just flickered to life, showing a live camera feed from the hangar. And in that feed was the shape again, tall and slow and wrong, standing now, where Tanner had crouched earlier, its head tilting inhumanly slow toward the camera, like it saw him, like it knew. He turned to run and found the door behind him gone, not sealed, not broken, just gone like it had never been there, like the ship had changed itself, while he wasn't looking, like it didn't want him to leave anymore. His hands shook, his breath came shallow and fast, the cutter heavy, the flare low, the air thick and bitter with the smell of something ancient, something alive. Then came the whisper, soft and near his ear, saying his name slowly and with joy. Tanner ran deeper into the ship, not knowing where he was going, just knowing it was following. Tanner ran into the lower deck, where broken pipes hissed quietly, and the smell of scorched metal hung thick in the air. The glow from the flare was nearly gone, its light barely holding back the deep shadows that curled like smoke around every corner. Behind him, the thing moved again, not with speed, but with certainty, like it already knew every hallway, every wall, every breath he would take. He reached the maintenance shaft and climbed inside. The metal ladder rattled under his weight, each step echoing like a warning into the shaft below. As he slid the grate shut behind him, the air grew tighter, colder, like something old had taken root here. The walls were covered in grime and scratched with symbols he could not read, claw marks etched into steel, telling stories no one wanted to hear. His breathing was fast, sharp, filled with panic, but he kept moving downward, not knowing what waited, only knowing he could not stop. Above him came the sound again, a soft dragging like a chain, pulled across the deck, then silence followed by something worse, the sound of breathing, not as not human, close, too close. He reached the lower level, a forgotten area of the ship filled with old engines and half-melted consoles. The power was still dead, but a strange green glow pulsed faintly from a console on the far wall. It blinked slowly, like a heartbeat, like it was waiting for him. He moved closer, hands shaking, eyes locked on the screen. The glow lit up part of the wall, revealing a message scratched in deep, careful lines. It said it eats light, it drinks heat, it loves sound. Tanner touched the console, and it responded like it had been touched before, a soft hum rising from beneath the floor. Then a soft voice began to speak, not through speakers, but inside his head, a whisper made of static and wind. It told him he was not the first, that others had come down here too, that none of them had gone back up. It told him the ship was sick, and this thing was the sickness of thing, without shape, without time, without reason. It had come through a tear in space, drawn by noise, drawn by heat, drawn by people who never knew what they had invited. Tanner backed away from the console, his stomach turning, his skin ice cold. He turned to leave, but the path was no longer empty. The shadows had changed shape, tall and wrong. Too many joints, too many fingers, and where its face should be there was nothing, only a hollow place that seemed to pull light from the room. It stepped forward, not walking, but gliding, its body brushing the walls without sound. He raised the plasma cutter and pulled the trigger. It sparked once, then died. The fuel cell drained, or stolen the flare, and his other hand finally went out, leaving only the green glow from the console and the shape that did not fear it. He stumbled back into a storage alcove, locking the hatch from inside. The door groaned, but held for now. Inside the room were broken tools, shattered suits, and an old emergency beacon long since dead. He grabbed it anyway, slamming the activation switch again and again until a weak red light blinked once, then again, then went out. Something inside the beacon cracked, and it started to buzz softly, then louder. The noise filling the room, the kind of sound that would draw the thing like blood draws sharks. Tanner crushed the beacon under his boot, and silence returned again, like the ship was holding its breath, like it was waiting for something to happen. Then from above came the sound of steel tearing metal, screaming. As something heavy moved across the ceiling, the hatch above groaned. Under pressure, the bolts bending inward, the door beginning to peel like skin under claws. He ran to the back of a room, found an old access duct barely wide enough to crawl through the metal, cold and slick with moisture. He slid inside, pushing forward through the dark, not stopping, not thinking, just crawling, his elbows raw, his knees bleeding from scraping sharp metal. The sounds above faded, then returned ahead of him, then behind again, like the ship was folding on itself, reshaping its hulls to trap him inside its rusted bones. He reached a vent at the end of the duct and kicked it open, falling into another chamber, this one full of mirrors, cracked and broken like someone had tried to smash their own reflection. The walls were painted with old warnings, some in alien languages, some in English, some smeared in what looked like black ash. They all said the same thing: don't speak, don't breathe, don't look into its face. In the center of the room was a small drone flickering with weak light, its camera lens pointed at him. It beeped twice, then flashed red. He waved at it, desperate, hoping someone still watched from outside the hangar, from the station above, from anywhere. But the screen stayed dark, no reply, no signal, only static, then a final flash from the drone and a voice crackling through it, low and broken. It said, "We see you, but we can't help, it's already inside." Tanner dropped the drone and turned as the room filled with a strange sound, not a growl, not a scream, but a memory, the voice of his sister, the laugh of an old friend, the sound of a mechanic's torch. The thing was using his own memories against him. It was reaching into his mind, pulling pieces out like thread from a coat and showing them back to him like game. He ran again, the corridor, twisting the lights above him, bursting one by one, as if snuffed out by an invisible hand. The floor slick now with fluid from broken pipes, or maybe something else, something warmer. He slipped once, fell hard, scrambled up, and didn't look back even when he heard his own voice behind him calling his name, softly, kindly. At last he reached the hangar lift door, wide open now, the power back on just enough to mock him inside the lift. The panel blinked, asking for a destination. He hit the top deck button again, and again the doors began to close, slow, heavy, like they were fighting against something outside, and just before they shut completely, he saw it again on the other side, standing still, watching, not angry, not afraid, just patient. As the lift rose, he sank to the floor, breathing hard, hands, shaking eyes, wide, the silence heavier now than ever before, and he knew this was not over, not yet. Tanner stepped out of the lift, his boots landing on steel floor panels that groaned underfoot. The top deck was colder than before. The lights flickered weakly above, casting long shadows down narrow walkways filled with crates, cables, and dust. It was too quiet, no echo, no humming systems, just a dry silence that pressed against his ears like a warning. He moved forward toward the control center, the only place left that might still hold contact with the main station. Above, the hallway stretched long and dark, lined with smashed monitors and walls scratched with deep grooves. Something had come through here and left a trail, but it was not blood, not oil. It was something black that moved slowly like smoke frozen in time. Each step he took echoed louder than it should, as if the ship itself was listening, waiting. He held the old plasma cutter, even though it was dead, its weight still comforting in his hand like a memory of power. He walked past a shattered window that once showed stars, but now only reflected his own pale face, tired eyes, and something else, something behind him that was no longer there when he turned. He entered the control center and found a main console, cracked open, sparks flicking out from under its panel screens, flickering with half-broken code warnings flashing in a dozen languages, all saying the same thing: containment failed, do not engage, unknown entity. Present his hands, moved fast, typing commands, rerouting power, trying to restore communications with the outside. A burst of static answered his call, then a voice, quiet, almost mechanical, said his name, not in fear, not in help, just curiosity. It repeated Tanner again and again, each time more clear, more human. He backed away from the console, as the lights in the room dimmed, then turned red emergency lights, bathing the space in a glow that felt like blood. From the far end of the room, a panel slid open and something stepped inside, its body tall and twisted, its limbs bending in ways they should not. Its surface shimmered, not metal, not flesh, something else. It did not walk. It drifted forward like it belonged to the ship, like the walls made space for a Tanner, held his breath, heart pounding, unsure if moving would trigger it, unsure if standing still would save him. Then the voice came again. This time, not from a speaker, not from a machine, but from within his mind. It whispered truths he did not want to hear, that it had come long ago through a hole in space left open by careless science, that it had no name, no goal, no hunger, only a desire to be seen, to be known, to be part of something living. Tanner shook his head, tried to block the voice, but it pressed harder, filling his skull with memories. He never lived people, he never met places he had never seen, as if the creature was pouring itself into him bit by bit, trying to become him, or maybe make him become it. The lights flashed again, and the emergency door behind him opened with a hiss. He ran through, without looking back, past empty rooms filled with tools and corpses dried, and hollow, past hallways that shifted slightly with every step, like the ship was bending around him, shaping his path, until he reached a small elevator at the end of the maintenance wing. He jumped inside and hit the lower hangar button, hoping it would take him far enough away from the thing, far enough to breathe. The elevator rattled down slowly, the lights inside flickering above like fireflies dying in a jar. The screen showed static, then a map, then static again, until finally the door opened, and he stepped into a bay he had never seen before, an old experimental wing sealed for decades. The air here was thick with dust and age and something worse, something hungry. Across the bay stood a single vessel, small, fast, looking newer than anything else here, its lights still blinking, its engines on standby. He moved toward it fast, hoping it still worked, hoping he could get it into orbit long enough to send a real signal. But as he reached the boarding ramp, he heard it again, the sound he now knew too well, soft, dragging motion that came with no footsteps, followed by silence, so deep it made his ears ring. He entered the ship and sealed the door. Behind him began the startup process, panels lighting up slowly, systems coming online bit by bit, until the comms buzzed with life, and a voice came through. It was not human, but familiar, a technician from the station above who had seen the signal, who had heard the emergency call, and was trying to help. Tanner spoke fast, told him about the creature, the dead systems, the hangar, the voices in his head. The technician paused for a moment, then told him to stay where he was, that help would come, that he needed to lock the ship down and wait. But something in the voice was wrong, not its words, but its tone, too calm, too measured, as if it already knew everything, as if it was repeating lines written long ago. He cut the comms and moved to the rear chamber where the engines were still warm. He opened a side panel and found a strange device fused into the system, not human, not known, wires like veins running through the hull into the controls, as if the ship itself had been touched or infected by the thing from the hangar. He tried to pull it out, but the device pulsed with a faint glow. Then the lights flickered, and he felt the temperature drop. The air thickened, and a shadow passed across the small cockpit window. Something was outside, circling, moving like smoke made of bone. It tapped once on the hull, a sound so soft it should not matter, but it froze him to the core. He backed away, locked himself in the cockpit, and powered up the engines. They whined to life, sputtering, but working enough to lift the ship from the bay, enough to guide it toward the emergency tunnel that led outside the station. The walls around the bay began to shake, as if the ship itself was trying to hold him in, to keep him from leaving. He pushed the throttle, and the vessel shot forward, smashing through the weakened exit hatch. Fire and debris flying as the ship escaped into the blackness of space. Behind him, the bay collapsed in on itself, lights blinking out one by one until the entire section was swallowed in darkness. Tanner sat in silence, breathing hard, eyes locked on the stars ahead. But he knew it was not over. He could still hear the voice, not loud, not clear, but present, whispering in the back of his mind like a memory that would never fade. And somewhere behind him, far beyond the ship, far beyond space, the hangar still waited. Tanner floated in space alone, the stars stretched wide around him like quiet eyes watching from every side. The small ship drifted through the void, its engines humming low, its lights flickering now, and then like a heartbeat trying to steady after a deep wound. He sat in the pilot's seat, breathing slow, fingers trembling from what he had escaped or what he thought he had escaped. The creature's voice still echoed in his mind, soft, slow, gentle, like a lullaby made of things best left unsaid. It did not scream, it did not command, it just lingered like smoke after fire, always present, always moving between thoughts like it belonged there now, like it had made a nest inside the corners of his mind. Tanner tried not to think, tried to focus on the ship systems, fuel low oxygen at 60% and AV sensors, damaged communications locked in a loop, no outgoing messages reaching anyone, no signal strong enough to punch through the deep quiet of space. He opened the emergency beacon, typed a simple message, repeating over and over in red letters: distress, signal unknown, threat life form, escaped quarantine, heading toward outer belt, please respond. He waited for a reply, waited for a ping, waited for anything, but only static returned, the kind of static that feels heavier than sound, as if it carries something behind it, something old, something breathing. Tanner closed the beacon and walked to the back of the ship, opened the supply. Hatch took a ration pack and sat on the floor chewing, without tasting, trying to keep his hands from shaking. The lights above flickered again, but this time they did not return. They stayed off, leaving only the dim glow from the NAV console and the blue hue of the emergency ring around the airlock. He stood fast, eyes scanning every corner. Shadows shifted, but nothing moved, no sound, no motion, no sign, but the fear still returned strong, thick like tar in his chest. He moved to the maintenance panel, pulled it open, and found the strange black wiring again, thin tendrils running along the ship's veins like roots feeding on systems that should have been clean, should have been untouched. He traced the wires to the back engine core, and there it was again, the shape he feared, not fully. They're not fully gonna shimmer like heat, but cold, pressing outward against the engine walls. He reached for the manual, override, began cutting lines, pulling cables, forcing systems to reboot. The ship groaned under the strained power. Surged lights flared, and for a second the shimmer vanished, gone like a ghost afraid of fire. But just as fast it returned, and this time it spoke not in words, not in voice, but in feeling pressure rising behind his eyes, a deep cold touch that said, "You are mine." Tanner staggered back, grabbed the emergency plasma cutter, aimed at the wall, fired. Once the heat lit the room red and bright enough to burn away the shadows, at least for now, the shape recoiled, hissed like steam from a broken pipe, then vanished again into the ship's dark corners. He used the moment to seal the engine room, lock the panel, and reroute what power he had to navigation and external scan. The scan returned one result: a ship close, not far, maybe an hour out, old military signature, still active, maybe a patrol, maybe salvage. Either way, it was hope, and Tanner locked onto it. With what little juice he had left, he sent a burst ping with coordinates and identification repeated 3 times in all known galactic tongues, then waited again, heart beating in rhythm with the pulsing red light on the console. Minutes passed, maybe more, maybe less. Time no longer felt the same. His head throbbed, and his skin itched like something was crawling underneath it. He scratched until he saw blood, then stopped, afraid that doing more might open something he could not close. He whispered to himself, not to the voice, not to the thing, just to himself, a name, a memory: earth, sun, wind, friends, laughter, things that felt more real than this. Then the ship replied, the console blinked, and a voice came through mail, clear, strong, human. "You are not alone. This is Commander Elias Brand of the salvage ship Nomad. We got your signal. We are en route, hold position. If able, if you can't hold, we'll drag you out. Stay sharp and stay conscious. We read an unknown signal inside your ship." Tanner responded, fast, voice raw, but thankful, repeating his name, repeating the warning about the thing inside. The Nomad closed distance fast. Within 40 minutes, their signal grew stronger. Their light pierced the blackness like a lighthouse in storm. One ship against another, one man, hoping against what felt like fate. They latched with a docking clamp, and the hiss of pressure equalization sang through the corridor, a sound like salvation. Tanner moved to the airlock, ready to open it, but paused, hand on the panel, breath shallow. The voice in his head was louder, now angry, not screaming, not shouting, but shaking like rage, trapped behind walls. It did not want to leave, not yet, not ever. It said, "Stay with me. You are known here. You are safe. You are home." Tanner pushed the button. Anyway, the door slid open, and light poured in, pure, clean light, and the figure of a man in dark salvage armor, helmet shining, gun raised, eyes wide. Commander Brandt shouted for him to step forward slowly. No sudden moves. The readings from his ship were spiking with bio-signatures. Not human, not known. Tanner stepped across the threshold, and the second his boots hit the Nomad floor, the voice in his mind screamed, not in pain, but in fear of being left behind, of being alone, of losing its vessel. The ship behind him groaned again, as if it too felt abandoned, and the strange black wires burst through its walls, reaching toward him like hands, like roots grasping in desperation. But Brant hit the emergency release, and the clamp blew the ship back, spinning slowly into the void now, quiet now, dead, or maybe just sleeping. Tanner collapsed on the deck, breathing hard, eyes, wide hands, shaking again, and Brant kneeled beside him, scanning for signs of contamination, scanning for infection, scanning for anything that could explain the thing he just saw and heard and felt. He asked what happened, but Tanner said nothing, just pointed to his head and whispered quietly, not in words, but in meaning. It never leaves. The medical bay lights were soft and white, not harsh like the flickering bulbs in Hangar 94, not pulsing like the red warning lights that had burned into Tanner's memory. They were calm, almost too calm, like a silence after a storm that promised the storm was not truly over, just hidden, waiting to rise again. Tanner sat on the edge of the cot, shoulders, hunched head, low arms covered in bandages that felt more like paper than armor. The Nomad's medics had scanned him twice, then a third time, but the results made no sense to them. They said he was fine, vitals steady, no signs of infection or physical damage. Yet every time the lights dimmed for even a second, he tensed like the shadow would return through the floor or ceiling or mind. Commander Brant stood nearby, arms crossed, his eyes sharp like they had seen more than one nightmare. In deep space, his voice was calm but direct. He said, "I need you to tell me what it was, not what you think it was, but what you know it was." Tanner did not answer right away. His fingers gripped the edge of the cot. His mind chased thoughts in circles, each one darker than the last. He looked up and said softly, "It was not a creature, not a ghost, not a parasite. It was something that waits, something that follows, something that learns." He paused, looked at the ceiling, as if he could still feel it watching, then said, "It touched my thoughts. It knew who I was, who I am now, who I might be." Brant nodded, once like he understood, even if the words were not clear, then walked to the console and opened a file from ship logs. The screen showed static noise, broken data streams, corrupted segments, then one image, a blurred shape in the engine room, caught just before the blackout. It looked like smoke and bones and movement, without form, like something that should not exist. "We saw this before," Brant said quietly, 9 years ago on a mining moon deep in the red sector. Same kind of signal, same kind of survivor. Only one man made it out, and he never spoke again, just stared at walls until he vanished from a locked room. During the night, no signs of entry, no signs of exit, no body, no blood, just gone. Tanner said nothing, his thoughts heavy, his body cold, like something inside still waited, like it had not finished its game, not yet. Brant closed the file and looked him in the eye. "What you saw, what you felt, it left something in you. I don't know what, I don't know why, but we can't bring it with us to the next station, not without risking every soul aboard this ship." Tanner stood, slowly, legs stiff, breath shallow, but steady. "I know what I have to do." They suited him up again, but this time it was not for escape. It was for return. The Nomad's shuttle hung ready in the docking bay, loaded with a beacon, a containment charge, and enough fuel for one final jump. The plan was simple: drop the shuttle near a dead star, drift it into the gravity, while trigger the charge, and let the void erase what science could not. But as Tanner stepped into the shuttle, something happened. The lights around him pulsed, once not with power, but with presence, like a heartbeat from something that had no body, only need hunger. He paused, then stepped forward anyway, sealing the hatch. Behind him, his voice came through the channel calm and low: "Tell them not to follow, not to search. If the signal returns, bury it. And forget it. If it speaks to you, don't answer." Brant replied, quiet but firm, "You're not alone out there. You're never alone now, are you?" Tanner looked through the glass at the stars ahead and said, "Maybe not, but at least I know who I am now." The shuttle detached, drifted slowly into the black, its engines dark, its lights dim. Only the beacon blinked blue and slow, like a tear falling in space. The Nomad turned away, engines warming, crew silent, as they watched the last trace of their visitor vanish into distance. Inside the shuttle, Tanner sat back, closed his eyes, and waited. The pressure in his mind rose again, but this time he did not flinch, did not scream. He whispered a name, not his own, not human, something the voice had given him, something old, something that opened a door between his thoughts and its hunger. The walls of the shuttle began to shift, not physically, but in shape and color and memory, like it was not a ship, but a skin, and he was inside it, not as prey, not as host, but as seed, something that would grow if left unchecked, something that would wait for a mind weak enough to break and a heart just strong enough to listen. But before it could complete, before it could become, Tanner reached for the console, entered the final command, and triggered the charge. Light filled the shuttle, white and endless and final, not like stars, not like fire, but like a void turning itself inside out, swallowing what should not be, what could not be, what never should have touched thought or flesh or name. The beacon blinked one last time, then stopped. Far away on the Nomad, Brant closed the channel, walked to the observation deck, and looked out across the dark. He whispered something under his breath, something no one heard, a prayer, maybe, or a warning, or a goodbye. Back on Earth weeks later, a message arrived from deep space, unreadable, garbled, broken, but with one phrase repeated again and again. He remembers. He remembers. He remembers. And somewhere in the deep black between stars where light dies and thought fades, something else waited. Something patient. Something hungry. Something that remembers too.